I like Antonio Pierce, but he has his work cut out for him this upcoming season, man, because ain't no way the Raiders are going to finish any better than third place in the AFC West with Gardner Minshew and Aidan O'Connell at quarterback. And look, I get it. Antonio Pierce won a good amount with Aidan O'Connell going up against backup quarterbacks. He also was able to steal a win against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs on Christmas. It was a Christmas miracle. But with the way the AFC West is going to be this season, now that the Chargers are going to actually have a legit coach in Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert's going to be fully healthy. You're going to have the Chiefs that are going to be better this season than what they were last year. And even the Denver Broncos, with Bo Nix at the helm, they're going to surprise a lot of people this year. This is an NFL now where it's really hard to win if you don't even have above average quarterback play. And unless you can get that out of Gardner Minshew or Aidan O'Connell, I don't see the Raiders winning no more than maybe 5-6 games. Now, that doesn't mean that I think Antonio Pierce is a garbage coach. It's just that it's hard to win when you don't have good quarterback play. And when you're in a division where you have Patrick Mahomes, the best QB in the game, and Justin Herbert, who's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the game, and you got Jim Harbaugh, who's a proven head coach, we know that Jim Harbaugh wins. Okay, he's won everywhere that he's been. There's no reason to believe that he won't win with the Chargers. I was really disappointed to see the Raiders walk away from this past year's draft with no quarterback. If they would have got Michael Penix, which I'm pretty sure was the guy they wanted, but Atlanta fucked that up for everybody, I pretty much saw the writing on the wall. And where do the Raiders go from here? Well, I mean, the only thing that you have going for you is that your defense is going to be good. And overall, you should have a really good team. The offensive line should be pretty good. You got Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. He's a monster. You got Brock Bowers. You got a really good team. And your defense is going to be really good too. So now, if you're a Raiders fan, you just have to sit back and wait to see what quarterback falls in your lap next year's draft. Because next year's quarterback class is not going to be that good, but you're going to have Carson Beck. You're going to have Shedeur Sanders. So you're going to have the opportunity to walk away with the franchise quarterback next year, and then you should be able to compete for a playoff spot. Now, if you find a way to compete for a playoff spot this year, Antonio Pierce has all my respect, and without a doubt, he should win Coach of the Year. If he can find a way to squeeze 8 or 9 wins out of this team this year, he's doing miracle work down there in Las Vegas, bro. Because, listen, it's a difference between beating backup quarterbacks like what you did last year. Did you know that 4 out of 5 of Antonio Pierce wins last year as the interim head coach of the Raiders came against backup quarterbacks? The only starting quarterback he beat was Patrick Mahomes, and that was a Christmas miracle. Like, they beat the New York Giants with Tommy DeVito. They beat the New York Jets with Zach Wilson, and he was a backup because Aaron Rodgers was starting at the start of the season. And then you beat Jarrett Stidham at the end of the year. And, of course, we all remember when they annihilated the LA Chargers on Thursday Night Football, and they got Brandon Staley fired. But you were going up against Easton Stick, and that team quit on the Chargers. I want to see what Antonio Pierce does now as the full-time head coach of the Raiders, going up against, Jim Harbaugh and Andy Reid twice in a year again. Because it's a difference when you're going up against Brandon Staley and all these backups versus now when you're going up against a fully high-powered Chargers team that has great coaching now. Somebody that's going to be able to help Justin Herbert finally be able to have the success that many people criticize him for not having. And we already know what the Chiefs do every single season. And what makes this season tough for the Raiders is that their schedule isn't easy. Now, their official schedule hasn't released yet with the weeks and days that they play certain teams, but just looking at their opponents, they play every team in the AFC North and NFC South. Now, you should be able to have success against the NFC South, but the AFC North, asking the Raiders to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens with the healthy Lamar and Joe Burrow, it's going to be a tough task when you got Gardner Minshew and Aidan O'Connell at quarterback. Gardner Minshew, he's a decent quarterback. But that's the problem with Gardner Minshew. He's a decent quarterback. Many Indianapolis Colts fans would tell you that if they had Anthony Richardson starting for the whole entire season, they probably would have made it to the playoffs. Hell, you saw that final game of the season when the Colts lost to the Houston Texans and Gardner Minshew threw the ball in the dirt to that running back on that 4th and 1. You remember when he got Michael Pittman's head freaking taken off because he threw him a damn kill shot? Gardner Minshew is a decent quarterback that's good enough to get you by a season and keep you respectable. You're not going to be a crappy team of Gardner Minshew at QB, but you're not going to be a playoff team neither with how tough your schedule is and how tough the division is. Like, I don't understand why these Raiders fans keep on living off, what Antonio Pierce did last year when he didn't really beat any good teams outside of Kansas City. And Kansas City, they weren't good when you beat them. That same Chiefs team that you played in the regular season was not that Chiefs team that you saw in the postseason. If you would have played the postseason version of Kansas City, they would have beat you by at least 5 touchdowns. Kansas City is just one of those teams that once they get to the playoffs, they flip a different switch. And I remember the last time I got caught up into the Raiders interim head coach hype when they had Rich Bisaccia and he turned their season around. They went to the playoffs and they lost to Cincinnati in wild card, and then they got rid of him, and then they brought in Josh McDaniels, and people thought since that was a playoff team before with an interim head coach, imagine what you could do with the guy who you actually hired to be your full-time head coach, and we saw how that played out. And as much as I love Antonio Pierce, I'm not ready to anoint him yet. He still has a lot that he has to show me. We've seen plenty of instances where these interim head coaches have caught fire. The team starts to galvanize behind them, and then things go left once they get the full opportunity. So if anything, Antonio Pierce has more to prove to Raider Nation and the rest of the NFL than what he did last year. Last year, nobody expected the Raiders to even be able to win the amount of games they did with AP at the helm. But now, with you having to go up against Gardner Minshew, with you having Gardner Minshew and Aidan O'Connell, and you're going up against Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, you're pretty much bringing the equivalent to a knife in a gunfight. These guys have some of the best quarterbacks in the game. Meanwhile, you have 2 of the worst quarterbacks in the game. At least when it comes to starting quarterbacks. Gardner Minshew isn't terrible. I'll take him over Zach Wilson and Daniel Jones. Hell, I would take him over the dude we got starting for my favorite team right now, Russell Wilson. But that doesn't say a lot. In today's NFL, it's a quarterback-driven league. And when you don't have great quarterback play, you put yourself at a disadvantage, especially when you're a defensive-minded coach like Antonio Pierce is. Kevin Stefanski went to the postseason last year with Joe Flacco. Kevin O'Connell was able to somewhat keep Minnesota afloat when Kirk Cousins went out with that Achilles injury. You want to know why? Because they're offensive-minded coaches. But when you're a defensive-minded coach, though, it's a lot harder to win when you're always at a disadvantage nearly every single week when it comes to the quarterback comparison. The only defensive-minded coach that finds ways to win with whoever at quarterback is Mike Tomlin. And even then, there's only so far you can go when you don't have good quarterback play. If the Raiders would have had Michael Penix, I would be viewing this team so much more differently than what I am now. Like, one of the biggest disappointments of this offseason had to be the Raiders walking away without an upgrade at quarterback. So I really don't see the Raiders having that much success this year. I don't believe that's going to be an indicator that Antonio Pierce is a bad coach. I just think that it's more of an indicator that, hey, they need to make sure it's more of a priority next offseason to get a quarterback. And I really hope that they get Shedeur Sanders because Deion and Antonio Pierce already have a pretty good relationship. Shedeur Sanders would get the opportunity to play indoors. I don't care what the naysayers are saying about Shedeur Sanders. He's a first-round caliber quarterback. And with the team that the Raiders already have right now, you put Shedeur Sanders on that team next year, you should be a playoff team. So this season may be rough if you're a Raiders fan. Buckle up. I don't think you're going to be trash. I don't think you're going to be a 3-4 win team. I'll be shocked if that happens. You're going to be one of those teams that, on paper, you're not going to look that good. But when you play teams, you're going to be able to keep it close. And you may even end up finding ways to just steal a couple of games like you did during Christmas Day when you got that Christmas miracle win against Kansas City. Like, I don't know how the hell you can win a game with your quarterback not completing the pass after the first quarter. Like, that was freaking insane to watch. But I do believe in Antonio Pierce, but, this is just going to be a really tough season for him. You got to play the AFC North. The NFC South is doable, but then you got the Rams and the Dolphins on the road. Those are going to be really tough games. And with what you got at quarterback, you're just at such a big disadvantage that it's going to be hard for you to come close to replicating the season that you had last year unless you get a few bounces to go your way.